Hey, welcome to another podcast episode of Journey to the Top, a C-suite conversation. And I am joined by the Chief People Officer of Total Security Solutions, Christine Sermak. Christine, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Michael, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I've done a couple of these interviews now, and I don't know, how it's going to shake out, which one I'm going to put first, which one I'm going to put 10th. But I always start with the same question, and that is, Christine, take me back to whatever you want to say, like 7-year-old Christine or 8-year-old Christine. What did that little girl want to be when she grew up?
That's a great question. What did I want to be back then? I grew up in a neighborhood. We were the Cinnabar Circle crew, and we played a lot of sports. We had a cul-de-sac, so it was kickball. I always thought that again, I would do something in athletics. Back then, you didn't see yourself right on television. You grew up, you were watching like the Magic Johnsons. It was always the males that were on the sports. So I thought I wanted to do something in sports, and then probably you say 7, and maybe at about fourth grade. So that would put me around 9, 10, 11. I wanted to be a teacher. I idolized my second and third grade teacher. My fourth grade teacher told me I could be the first female president. That didn't quite work out. I never followed that path. But yeah, I think teaching. I mean, I was that kid who grew up, in the basement where the dad would hang. And again, I'm dating myself, Michael, because it'd be a plywood, and you'd paint it with special chalk that you could write on it. Now, you just hang the whiteboards for your kids if they want to play school. But I played school, and we went out and played basketball in the driveway, for recess. And so I got kind of the best of both worlds with teaching and coaching.
Well, I love that. I mean, I think, first of all, I think a lot of people wanted to be professional athletes or something about sports when they were growing up,
Yeah.
right? Like I was going to be the next Pudge Rodriguez. I was a catcher, but
Yep.
that quickly fizzled out. And then it was, I want to be an architect or a landscape architect.
Okay.
So all the different things that bounced around in my head, but you wanted to be a teacher, and so it's interesting because you became a teacher.
I did.
And
I did.
so how did that path? I mean, so you kind of figured out when you're in fourth grade or so. I mean, was it a linear path from then until being 22, 23 years old and getting your first teaching opportunity?
I think it was. Yeah, pretty much it was. It was one of those things that, that's when I was selecting colleges. I was looking for kind of the schools that, had strong educational schools. I took an intro to psychology my freshman year, absolutely loved it. So then I'm like, my path was going towards education, took the psychology, took 2 more classes in psychology, thinking that I wanted to be now a psychologist. And I think I got to abnormal psych, which is a lot of science and math. And I'm an English major. So definitely I was like, nope, I think I'm going to go back to teaching. And then from that moment on, Michael, it was, that was my path through school, and graduated and got my first teaching job, at Okemos High School, which is where I wanted to go to high school, actually. So I ended up teaching there. So yeah.
And you were there for, I think it was about 10, maybe 11 years
Yep. 10
teaching.
years.
Yeah, what did you teach at Okemos?
I taught English. So I was in the English department, and I basically primarily taught sophomores through seniors. And then I also coached. And so kind of like going back to what did I want to do? I wanted to play. I got to play, right? I got to teach and coach. I coached varsity girls basketball for a number of years and was an English teacher for 10 years. And then I had 2 daughters, and it was one of those things, where the season was over and I didn't realize one of my daughters, her teeth came in, and I missed it. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. So that's when I changed career paths, and for longer hours, not knowing how much administration of the hours they put in, but I ended up going to a middle school where I was an athletic director and an assistant principal, and eventually all three became the principal as well, and athletic director for 6 years.
Did you make your kids read Scarlet Letter or Red Badge of Courage or Farewell to
Scarlet,
Holland?
you're okay. So I was American Lit, so definitely
Yeah.
Scarlet Letter, Huck Finn. Yes, I probably taught the Scarlet Letter. Oh gosh, probably 15, 20 times, to
Yeah.
the point where they would do these drawings, and I try to make it fun. Soap operas, you get to do the soap operas back in the day, but as fun as you can make the Scarlet Letter. Were you,
Yeah.
I take it you were scarred by that novel.
Hester Prynne, right?
Yes.
I always wonder when I was taking American Lit at Grosse Pointe North High School, why they
Okay.
weren't choosing more exciting books for us to
Oh,
read. And
yeah.
now I would say I'm a big reader now. I'm an avid reader. I usually read 2 to 3 books a month.
Okay.
There's an updated version of Huck Finn called James that came out
Yes, I'm
recently.
reading that next month actually. So yeah,
Yeah,
so you've got Huck Finn. I mean, Lord of the Flies. I mean, what's better
absolutely.
than boys on an island,
Yeah,
killing each other?
absolutely. Well, not to take us down a big time rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
Hester Prynne was the first time I really realized why does she have the A put on her, but I think it was a priest or something, right? That was
Yeah.
like the adulterer didn't get any type of
No,
no
no,
shame, no
no
anything like
shame.
that,
He
right?
gave his own shame behind the doors. Yes, with the floggings. Yes. A lot of
Yeah.
symbolism in that book, Michael. A lot of symbolism.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you became a high school or a middle school principal, athletic director. I don't want to say you weren't a leader as a teacher because I certainly do think teachers, but you weren't like in an official type of role. I wonder if you
Yeah.
saw it like that because I want to eventually get to as we go a little bit further in this
Right.
podcast
Right.
how you become a leader. And did you always feel that way about who you were?
Yeah, I would say I was that kid in the neighborhood who would organize, going back to the kickball days. I would organize the games, and I actually had one of my best friends, who I still have today in second grade. We were both kind of those girls who were the tomboys who kind of just organized everything. And we typically formed the team so that we were winning, right? So we were super competitive. So we would always pick like, the kids who could, who are really athletic too. So yeah, I saw that, and even it's interesting, even in athletics, I was the point guard. So it's right. So you might not be have that intrinsically within you, but I still felt like I enjoyed setting the tone, running the show, trying to organize people, all working towards one common goal. So I think between the work in the classroom and then obviously running an athletic program. I was at Okemos High School, so I was the varsity coach there. So again, it's you're kind of the face of the program, all the way down into the younger grades. So I think again, developing those leadership skills, and especially back in the day, so this was 90s 2000s, and really having voice of females, being that role model and that leader. It was interesting. I just had a number of players come back from the class of, I think it must have been 99, I think they were. And that's the one thing they said is just being that role model, right? That voice to kind of see yourself in somebody else. And so, yeah, I would say that the leadership started early, and then I just, again, continued that in the different roles. And then the mentors that I had, so I look at some women in leadership that, whether it was Kathy Ashes, my high school, superintendent, when I was also a principal at the high school level. I did go back to Okemos for 12 years as the principal of the high school. She was instrumental. And I've had other, Narda Murphy, who was in Williamston, was another superintendent. So typically at those leadership levels, it was male dominated. But if you could see yourself in somebody, they exhibited kind of those same core values you had, you would emulate, and then you would begin picking up those skill sets and have those opportunities that you typically wouldn't see yourself having.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I mean, you're absolutely right, that insight there. I mean, I think that's why it's so important. My wife works for a big company. She's been in HR most of her career, and
Okay.
she always talks about, it is so critically important to put people who have never, like demographics, women, minorities, and
Mhm.
things like that in leadership positions, because once someone is there, everybody else can see it and aspire
Right.
to realize
Right.
that. And I think one of the things that we don't do a really good job in this country is we tend to say like, well, everybody, if they work hard, they'll get those opportunities, right?
Right.
But I think if you
Right.
don't ever see someone like you in that type of position, you don't necessarily maybe know to aspire to, or that
Mhm.
is a realistic goal.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very cool that you were setting that example for women, young women especially,
Mhm.
throughout your career. I was curious, since you're shaping impressionable minds, is that an awesome responsibility or an incredibly scary responsibility?
I think it's both. right? I think first off, it's awesome. And it's two ways, right? You don't really realize a lot of times people are saying they are shaping the lives of other humans. It's vice versa. I mean, you go back and I don't want to keep using the Scarlet Letter example, but I taught it. I had 4 sections of American Lit, and I never taught it the same way because it was the voices of the students who were in the class. Oh, I never thought about it that way. Now, yes, there's true ways symbolism, and you're looking at the literary importance and how it's reflection of history. But every single individual also shaped how I saw the book, or again, how I approached things. So I think that's the beauty of it too, right? Is I'm learning just as much from my students that they learn from me. And so that's why I really loved that profession. I mean, you could really impact one another and truly make that difference.
What did you start to learn about, being an administrative role? I mean, the leadership changes
Mhm.
when you're a teacher. Yes, you do have that mentorship and that leadership, but ultimately, when you go into the administration role, you also have the discipline part of it. You have
Right,
the,
right.
if a child does not, get through school, that's on you, right? Like there's a lot
Mhm,
of
mhm.
things where you start to, I want to say, you really take an accountability for those young men and women. And I wonder how that started to influence you and shape how you started thinking about things.
Yeah, well, I mean, the great thing about being a teacher before I became a principal is, and I think I learned it even more, not only in the classroom, but even more so as a coach, is you really get to know them as human beings. So while you might think it's really this, it comes easy for them, or things are, kind of like you said, it's a simpler path. Everyone is on a journey, right? And everybody is impacted by their life circumstances. So I think that really shaped me when I was a principal, where I had policies, right? There were policies, there were procedures, so that again, the greater good, really was stable. But there's still that human element. So I really look through the lens, what is best with it for this individual, while also looking at the greater good, of a school system. So I think that really shaped me, and I think even becoming a parent allowed me to see things through a lens of this parent who is coming very concerned. We all want the end goal. And again, how do you collaborate? How do you truly hear that parent's concerns while still taking in the greater good of a community within a community, which is ideally what that school or that classroom is. So I think every single thing that I was exposed to, whether I was a student, a coach, a teacher, a parent, a mentor, for my student athletes, like has impacted me along this journey, as well as obviously those mentors that I've had, along the way.
So you transitioned from, and this is where the story gets really interesting. Because I heard Christine speak. She was recognized with an award at the Michigan Manufacturers Association dinner a couple of months ago. And she's the chief people officer at Total Security Solutions. You didn't, that's not a typo. You didn't mishear me there. She went from high school principal
Yeah,
to chief people officer,
right.
and one of the more interesting job changes I've ever heard of.
Mhm.
I thought I was different going from sports talk show host to commercial insurance, but yours. So how did that change come about? And
Oh,
then I'd like to get in a little bit of, because you said something really cool. You said about how you care so much about the individual, but then you also care about the greater good. And I would
right,
imagine that's a
right.
big part of what your focus is now.
Yeah. I think it's all the human element, right? I mean, it's still that teaching and coaching and mentoring and that those values and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I ended up retiring at the end of 2021. So I went through COVID. And then I did a year beyond COVID, where it was I'm planning, how do you have a graduation, indoors, but the rules keep changing, and that sort of thing too. Now we're transitioning back to normal, which is not normal anymore, right? It's been redefined. So I did that, and I thought I would just retire and maybe just get like a part-time job, as a fill-in, not, like a Walmart greet or anything, but just something kind of low key. I thought, Michael, I was going to take 3 months off. It took me 7 months, I think, before I even got out of my pajamas and actually could breathe again. I didn't realize how exhausted I was. So, yeah, I started looking for another job, not a career, and ended up discovering Total Security Solutions through a mutual friend. I was looking at some bigger organizations, tried to, some people were trying to get me into doing consulting and mentoring other principals. I said, I want to try something I think different and new. I'm always up for challenges. Again, I'm competitive and like to push myself. And so it was one of those things I could go down this path and still do something different, but it would still be in this realm, or I could be something completely different. And I opted for the road less traveled. If we want to go back to some other literary references with Robert Frost, I definitely took the road less traveled and had no idea where I was going. But it sounded very intriguing. I believed in what the company was about, and especially I was aligned to the core values. And so, yeah, I took that leap of faith and I think grew the most I've ever grown because I was so uncomfortable with it. I was so out of my element. And that truly it's made all the difference. I've really enjoyed being in this new role, in this new environment, really in the business realm with adults, and not, picking up the phone or anything with whether it's parents or teachers or predominantly, came from a school of over 1,500 students to an organization of, 135 adults.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a completely different realm.
So interesting. When I talked to Michelle Jump, the CEO of MedSec, she talked a lot about one of her strengths and something that has propelled her throughout her career has been curiosity. And so
Yeah.
because she's always been curious, she's constantly pushed herself into something that you just said, an uncomfortable space. And in that
Yes.
uncomfortable space, she looked at a problem and said, either I can figure out the solution, whether I know
Mhm.
it or not, or I can just walk away. And almost every time she has gone to find a solution. And so I'm curious, there's that word again, with that uncomfortable situation
Mhm.
you threw yourself into, how did you respond to that? And how do you think if you were giving advice to other people, like how do you make the most out of being uncomfortable?
Yeah. I mean, and that really, I think when you said curiosity, I think it's curiosity. I think it's that passion for lifelong learning and pushing your boundaries, right? Not like I've never been one, well, I've arrived, so I'm just going to kind of coast. It's always like, what's next? What more can we do to improve? And so I think that sense of curiosity or that desire to improve is part of you want to improve yourself, but really it's you want to improve, whether it's a policy, it's a system, it's a culture, it's communication. It could be, it's transferable, right? If you're all about growth and helping others improve, um, that's really what I think it's about. Yeah.
Well, I was watching the video of you being honored at that dinner. Something that stood out to me was having all of your colleagues talk about you. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that they talked about you was not, someone up in a big office,
Mm-hmm.
well removed from everything else. It was you on the ground floor, visiting with them. And coincidentally, I just met by accident with the CEO of a gigantic company in the state of Michigan that had more than 20,000 employees. And he said one of the things that he tried to do every single day was just walk up and down the
Yeah.
halls. And he's like, now, I'll be honest, I didn't stop and talk to every single person. I was the CEO
Right.
of a company
Right.
of, I
Right.
couldn't, but he wanted people to see him and he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to see his people. And I'm curious, I got the sense that that was similar for you at Total Security Solutions. And I wonder how much of being a teacher, being a principal, and being so close to the people that you were mentoring has carried over to your career now.
Yeah, and like it's for me, it's the human connection, right? So if I had a bad day at the high school it would be, you'd find me in the band room. Like, you know what? I just need 5 minutes to decompress. I'm going to go be in the band room, or you're going to walk the halls because it's the vibe and it's the energy of the students that really fills your bucket, sort of say. I think if you're going to be in any type of leadership position, you have to be connected to the people, because otherwise, like you said, you're in a bubble. How do you know what to focus your efforts on? I mean, obviously, data. You can look at your data, you can look at your numbers, you can look at your metrics, you can give surveys, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. It's having those one-on-one conversations. It's asking people what they're struggling with, what can I do to help. I think that really, is true leadership, right? Because we talk about servant leadership, we talk about making a difference. To me, that's what fills my bucket, but in turn, that's really what fuels organizations, right? Is how do you bring people together, hear the collective voice, and then how do you try to make improvements, whether it's internally for your internal customers or for us at Total Security Solutions. It's both, right? Because we also have external customers. So it's that combination of both. And you can't do that by sitting in an office, and writing policy or writing, those procedures that other people are going to execute. You have to kind of be in the trenches and be part of that process together.
You've been at Total Security Solutions for more than 2 years now.
Yep.
How do you think you've made an impact? Where do you think, and this is, I know some people struggle with this question a little bit because they're,
Yeah.
tend to be humble, tend to be like,
Right.
hey, it's not about me. But
Right.
I want you to throw all that out for a second, and I want you to make it all about you. But how do you think that you have made a positive impact on Total Security Solutions and its employees?
I think probably the two I would say is I tend to be a very positive person, even in the face of adversity. And I'm solution driven. So I think my voice of and just probably my presence of that, and goes back to you can be on the floor next to somebody, whether it's on the shop floor or in an office. And I think the other thing is my ability to be vulnerable. I talked about that, I think, and heard that as well, where I don't have all the answers, right? I don't go around tuning my own horn, but I ask those questions. I'm curious. I can say again, I'm not really sure, but let's figure this out, or let's go talk to so and so, or hey, let's try this. I think that openness within, especially if you came here, like I'm looking around, where it kind of like it's a very open floor plan, right? So if you were here, it's like everyone can see everyone. And so there's no walls, but sometimes there's artificial walls. If things are going tough, sometimes we have a tendency to put the walls up, and I'm just going to get down to business, or I'm only going to talk to the sales team versus the engineering team. I would say that was another piece, is I've really tried to, again, it's team, right? It's collaboration. I've tried to pull the voices together to have a collaborative spirit. And in the meantime, I use my teaching skills to, whether it's EOS or looking at processes or how do we talk to one another, really bringing that to light, so not only trying to model it, but then also trying to figure out how can we bring it to life, and how can we, speak the same language, sort of say. And sometimes that comes through training sessions with the leaders, or even putting together some training around processes that we didn't have really in writing before, and, figuring out how can I get groups together so it makes sense and we can make improvements, even baby steps. That's another favorite word,
Yeah.
as we move forward.
Christine, so many good things there. I don't even know where to start, but the collaboration, knocking down the artificial walls, I think that's a great way to look at it. As I look out in front of me here and I see like the cubicles, right? And so
Right, right.
cubicles are in a lot of ways, they're helpful because people can have their own space and
Hmm.
can, when they need to be on the phone and the whole thing, they have some level of privacy, but it also puts up barriers between us,
Right,
right? And so
right.
how do you increase collaboration? But the one I did want to talk about was vulnerability. I love that you
Hmm.
said that that is a strength of yours, because I think too often we think of vulnerability as a weakness. And
Right.
instead, vulnerability to me is I'm 45 years old, and I think it took me a long time to get there, but I think I figured out it's my greatest strength.
Yeah.
Because when I'm vulnerable, it makes me human. And when I'm human, it makes me relatable.
Yes.
because
Yes.
all of us are human, all of us err.
Mhm.
That's what we learn in catechism, like in second grade, right? So, um, but turning that vulnerability into a strength. I'm so glad you brought that up. And is it something that, I mean, is it again something intrinsically, or is it something that came to like a realization and realized like, hey, I can be the best version of myself the more that I give myself to other people?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And you asked, my 7 year self, I'm 7 year old self. I'm trying to even figure out because I'm also a perfectionist, right? So it's tough. I think I've always been relatable, because I'm pretty open. But to admit that I'm wrong, I think that's taken me time to learn that, right? And I don't know if and I can't remember that moment where it clicked. I was always that kid in classes that would ask the questions. Like I remember studying again Huck Finn, like sophomore year with Mrs. Partlow. I could ask a million questions and not be embarrassed that people are going to judge me. I just wanted to learn, and I wanted to understand. But I think there comes a time, especially as an adult, when you're a perfectionist or when you're in a leadership role or when you're trying to show, hey, I'm good enough to be in this room with you, where sometimes you don't want to say, I don't know, or gosh, I failed at that, or I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I don't know when that clicked for me, but I'm not afraid of that. It's not easy, but I feel like I've gained the most by just being myself and not trying to fake it or saying I know I have all the answers. And when you model that, like I think about different settings, other people start to do it. And then it's actually kind of fun because then it's like you can get real, you can throw ideas out on the table, poke holes in things. And I think that's where you end up getting some of your best results,
Yeah.
because everybody's being real.
Yeah. I think that the smartest leaders have always said, and I don't know whose book it is. I think it's probably in like 50 books, but you surround yourself with people smarter than you or more
Yeah.
talented than you or that have
Yep.
ideas and bring those to the table. And you say,
Hmm.
hey, that idea is better than my idea,
Yep.
and if you're willing to admit that, then not only do you maximize your own potential, but you maximize the potential of the group. Um,
Right. Right.
so, well, Christine, I mean, it's been fun chatting with you about this journey. I think 7-year-old Christine, if you could go back and see her, and she knew where you were headed, she'd be pretty excited, even if she was not going to be the next Mia Hamm. She would have been pretty,
Girls, so back then.
and I think we're in this awesome moment, it's been a long time coming. I taught a couple years at the University of Michigan. I taught the
Okay.
history of college athletics in my previous, life,
Yeah.
and we talked a lot about Title IX, and we talked about,
Yep.
what a cool moment in time we are because of the rise of women's basketball and so many women's sports. And I hope that as a country, we really continue to embrace and take advantage of this. I've got a 2-year-old daughter, and I would love for my 2-year-old daughter to be able to watch her heroes on TV and say,
Yes.
"Hey, I
In
want to
any
be
in any role. Yeah.
in
In
any
any
role,
role.
in any
Yep.
role." We have play-by-play and color commentators and
Yep.
general managers, and I think I saw a movie with Kate Hudson where she's going to be the owner of like the Los Angeles Lakers on a
Hmm.
Netflix show. So
Yeah. Yep.
anything is possible. And it's been a delight talking to you. And I do want you to tell the audience about Total Security Solutions. I didn't want this to be like a commercial
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
It's more about the journey to be in that C-suite role. But tell people about the company you work for.
Sure. So I work at Total Security Solutions. Our headquarters is in Fowlerville, and we have locations across the company or across the country. Two others, like in California, and we are all about protecting people. So we put together systems, barriers, well, physical barriers that protect people from physical attacks. Oftentimes bullets, a lot with the bullet resistant barriers and solutions for people. And so it really comes down to that is we are listening to our customers, and everything's customized. So when we talk about, core values, where does it fit? It's about that customer experience and the competitive nature of me on speed, right? So we're trying to, again, meet their needs, as quickly as possible. And so That's what we're all about is, saving lives and protecting people.
Okay. Well, my son is a huge Marvel Comics fan, and right now he's really into the Fantastic Four. And the Thing, after being exposed to cosmic rays, developed this scale-like skin that is
Ah,
impenetrable to
okay,
bullets. So I think your next security solution is to send people to outer space, get
okay.
blasted with radiation, and they'll come back with like this thing scales that they're impenetrable.
I'm going to bring that up at my next leadership meeting and see if that hits our target market. I'm not quite sure, but we might try that. We might try that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that chief product design officer is in your future if you bring that one up, but you can
Well, we
blame
do
it on
have a
me.
security film, so maybe that'll be after the security film.
I love it. I love it. Christine, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining
thanks,
us.
Michael. Thanks so much. I enjoy it. Appreciate it.